Why, hello there. It's me, Jeremy, your favorite bald dude telling you about Standard and Strange, a store and a brand with simple rules. Sell clothes they themselves would wear, manufacture it ethically, and build it to last. From boots made in Oregon to loop wheel garments made in Japan, find all the best clothes for your wardrobe at Standard and Strange. StandardandStrange.com. Hey, it's Jeremy Kirkland, and you're listening to Blammo. Another season, another episode of the pod. You know, it's funny because we do these seasons, and I don't even know why we do it. It really just kind of helps break up the amount of recording that we need to do. Lets me catch my breath a little bit. But last season, big season, a lot of new listeners. So I do want to call out, if you're new here, we have hundreds of episodes of maybe some of your favorite folks, maybe some of your soon-to-be favorite folks. I don't know. We got new episodes coming, but there's a lot of good old episodes. And I shouldn't have even said old. There's a lot of good previous episodes, right? Is that even a thing? Whatever. Are you all baking out there? It's hot as hell. It's just so hot. I'm a summer guy, but, I like it. But come July, August, I'm done. I get all cranky. I get whiny. I can't handle the heat. Can't handle it. Can't handle the heat or the humidity, but I just start walking around and I'm just mumbling profanity under my breath. I'm like Joe Pesci in Home Alone. Like I'm just frigga jigga, I can't handle it. I'm running. I am doing a lot of running, trying to maintain some form of shape or body. But I can only run at like 6 or 7 a.m., which is when I'd rather be sleeping. And now the air quality is getting bad. I mean, are we all just dying? I don't know. I promise I'm not being pessimistic. I don't even know how to talk. I promise I'm not being pessimistic. But maybe I am. I don't know. This summer, though, I've really been I've been trying to go in on a nice little morning routine, but a breakfast routine. Like I make my coffee, I have my hard-boiled eggs, a little bit of fruit, and I just sit there. I sit there at the kitchen table, and I'm eating it, just sitting there staring off into space like an idiot. No news, no life on the go, just being a breakfast boy. Biggest thing is I put on some music, think about my life, I drink my coffee, my little pour over that I'm making. But lately, I've been listening to a lot of instrumental music, mostly my guest this week. You like that transition? Me too. My guest this week, Hayden Pedigo. So for some folks, this guy's a bit of a head scratcher. He's a virtuoso guitarist. I mean, just phenomenal, incredible guitarist, playing in bizarro tunings that you don't even know what they are. I don't either. He's an amazing songwriter, and he's from the Texas Panhandle. But if you see his music videos or his pictures on social media, you think he's Eric Andre or Tim and Eric or Tom Green or something along those lines. But his style is also incredible. His guitar playing, like his clothing style, I'm serious, but like his guitar playing and his writing is even more so. He just released this new album, The Happiest Times I Ever Ignored, on Mexican Summer. Great label, by the way. And it's been on repeat in my house ever since. It's so good. I even play it to my son. He's all into it. We're just sitting there listening to Hayden Pedigo. But Hayden came on the pod this week. We discussed growing up in the Texas Panhandle, the appeal of mundane normalcy, his love of Tom Green. See, there was a connection there. Sick guitar riffs, getting fits off in cowboy clothes, and his new album, The Happiest Times I Ever Ignored. New season, new pod. Let's go. Talk to me about your wall, man.
There's a lot going on back there. Yeah, a lot of thrift store stuff.
Is that the vibe for most of your things? I feel like you embody like the hometown hero of a character on Pete and Pete.
I mean, like on Pete and Pete, the hometown hero, not Artie, right?
Not Artie. I think Artie might have had some other stuff going on.
Yeah.
That might have been a pejorative thing to say.
Yeah, Artie might have been on a list. I feel like something was up.
Yeah.
I mean, I like that comparison. That's one of my favorite TV shows ever.
Really?
Yeah, I love that show. Watched it so much as a kid. Really, really incredible show. Great music too.
Right?
Yeah, music's incredible.
Do you have any kids?
I do not, no.
Okay, well, ever since, I have 2 kids, and ever since I've gotten like more into seeing like the programming that they watch, I'm like, was I in the golden age of kids TV? And
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, right. You look at those shows and they really, really, really hold up, especially now. Like, I find myself following more of these like social media accounts that are really like embracing this, I don't know, like 90s aesthetic or whatever, or
Yeah.
I don't know, but it hits good. But yeah, your stuff, and I think maybe it's because of the videos that you do, but the juxtaposition of Hayden Pedigo music and Hayden Pedigo the individual with the like costumes and the art and stuff to it. What kind of walk me through some of this stuff? Is this a Texas thing?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's a Texas thing. I mean, I feel like finally with my music, the weird comedy aesthetic and the music are finally coming together in a way that makes sense. Cause I feel like that was always kind of the goal. I've been releasing music for 10 years now. I started when I was 18 when I first put out music, but it took a long time to like, I felt like those things were completely separate, and it took a long time to figure out how does this hyper sincere acoustic guitar music go with really absurd comical visuals and a sense of humor. And I feel like it was fine tuning it in a way that made sense to people, because I think acoustic guitar music tends to be really stuffy, and it can get kind of boring with the image and aesthetic that goes with that kind of music.
Well, like, what's an example of like stuffiness of acoustic guitar music?
Well, I mean, it's just like PR photos of like wearing a blazer, sitting in the woods, holding a guitar, and usually
these are your videos. Wearing a blazer and sitting in the woods. But I think you do it you do it very differently. Not to call out the irony of it, but like.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the video I just put up is a slight parody of a Will Ackerman video on Windham Hill, where he was sitting on a truck bed with his foot up on a log.
Yeah.
And I was kind of just pointing out the sense of humor in that video. Like, there's something kind of comical about this guy in a field sitting in the back of a truck playing this with his foot up on a log. It's like very unnatural, but under the Windham Hill guise of being very natural.
Right.
So that's the thing. So when I say acoustic guitar music can be kind of stuffy, for the most part, I think it is, because I don't know, if I read any interview of guitar players, it's usually about, I play guitar. And then that's what they talk about. And it's just kind of like, that's cool, you play guitar, but it's just, sometimes I just don't really want to read about people playing guitar.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think are you talking old stuff where it was like Chet Atkins and stuff, where like people had like empty personalities?
I mean, that's still now. I mean, that's kind of the common theme
Damn.
with a lot of solo guitar music is like I said, your PR photo will be wearing a blazer, sitting by a tree, looking stoic, and it's very serious. It's just kind of like, this is serious guitar music, and that's kind of what it is. And that wasn't really ever my thing. And also, I never really felt much like a guitar player. So I guess I tried to not identify as a guitar player. It just seems like a trap to be a guitar player. So I kind of tried to do other things that I thought were interesting. And I mean, I once said to somebody that I approached the guitar like Harmony Korine, and I approach comedy like John Fahey. It's just it's like different approaches where, you know, I feel like I take a lot from Harmony Korine and his ethos, but I don't make films, but I take a lot from the way he works and then apply it to what I do. And I mean, I can even look at what John Fahey did. And I think it's interesting how he's like the exception, where if you look back on a lot of his albums, the liner notes were just absolutely unhinged. It's really like proto shit posting in a gatefold of an album, which I really respect. It's like he was taking a dump on like the hyper self-important liner notes, and he was just trolling in them. And I thought that was really unique for the time, because who was doing that? You know, it's just like, you could kind of tell he was just kind of like, whatever, just, I want to put something dumb.
Yeah, I think there's a comedy level to your music that is really, really surprising, because like, you know, for me, I had first heard of your stuff, like many people, with the Amarillo City Council stuff. And I thought you were like a Tim and Eric dude. And then obviously you do this interview with Tim Heidecker with the Talkhouse Homies, which is a great interview, by the way. But then I was like, well, then I listen to your music, and like I'm like a Berkeley kid dropout. And so like, I'm like, dude, this guy rips. Like, this is not a fake guitar player or someone who's like, oh, but my real thing is making, you know, videos or something.
Yeah.
And I think that was some of the most, I mean, like I don't know, like some of these bizarre tunings and stuff that you're doing, like the music is really, really, really good.
Thank
like
you.
that I find myself like going and just like putting it on over stuff. And I'm a guy who, yeah, like I used to listen to just a ton of I mean, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and my dad was from Victoria, Texas. And so, and he was, you know, a preacher's my dad was a preacher. And so like there's a weird level of like gospel, you know, I don't know, like 80s, 90s Baptist like guitaring in there that just like really, really hits me. But so like when I listen to your stuff, like it's a very heavy experience. And then I started like watching all these other videos and I'm just like, holy shit, like the juxtaposition of this is like mind blowing across.
Well, for one, thank you. I'm really glad you enjoy the music because that's the best feeling is I want people to take the music seriously and feel the emotion and heaviness in it. And the thing is like, I feel like the more I think about what I'm trying to do is like, it's almost getting into this point of like post-irony guitar music because the music is very sincere. There's no sarcasm in the music at all.
Right. Okay.
And I feel sometimes that like my music approaches like intense sincerity to the point of nearly corny with some of the melodies I do. Like I feel like I'm more willing to be corny with being hyper sentimental in the music, which there's always a risk to that. When you're hyper sentimental, it can be really corny and sugary, but I'm willing to go that far. And then when you see the album cover and the videos, which are very absurd and goofy, I think it can give people a little bit of whiplash of like, this music is very sincere, hyper sincere, but this album artwork is disturbing and kind of ridiculous. So what's going on here? So I mean, it's kind of like, it's turning a little bit into like post-ironic guitar music. Where even for me, I'm still trying to figure out what it is exactly. I'm like trying to decode what's going on a little bit, just being like completely honest about it. It's kind of a disaster in a way.
Well, let's go down these two roads. So like the comedy, almost like I don't know, like the Kiss makeup and the chainmail and stuff. Where did this stuff come from? Like, where did you first get into these things?
Well, I think like a lot of goofy photos I would take with like corpse paint and chainmail and weird outfits. It kind of came about from living the Texas Panhandle, Amarillo, and Lubbock, Texas, and places like that. And they kind of have this mundane normalcy to them. Like they're hyper normal, like and so insanely hyper normal. And I kind of realized it was a great backdrop to put really ridiculous things over. And it really amplified both. Like recently I took a photo in corpse paint in front of a realtor billboard in Amarillo.
Oh, yeah,
like,
I saw that shit.
all of these women that are like selling sunset type realtors. And to me, I was like, that alone is really funny. Like, that's really weird. But in a way, it's almost like hyper normal insanity. Like, it's so wild, but it's also so insanely normal. It's like hard to explain it. But then I felt like when I put myself over it, it adds another layer of just insanity. So that's where I started doing all these weird photos. Is this place is so normal and made it easier to do strange things. And they felt stranger, you know, because if I were to do stuff like this in LA, New York, Austin, I don't know, it'd probably be kind of dumb because it would just be like, oh, some guy acting weird in LA. Like what's
where did you first get into this? Were you like really into Monty Python when you were younger or?
No, I mean, honestly, the stuff I was really into was honestly Tom Green and Harmony Korine were the two people.
Tom Green.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Tom Green is a like avant-garde comedy legend. And I've talked about it so much to people that Tom Green really is the true definition of a visionary, really visionary comedian, really outsider art. I think a lot of his early experiments with the Tom Green Show and public access TV are truly, to me, like put it in a MoMA. Like take Chris Burden out of the MoMA and replace him with Tom Green. Like that's
that's a hot take.
It is. I'm saying like I think I made this art curator mad once because I said I think Tom Green's infinitely better than Chris Burden, and I was being slightly like jokey, inflammatory. But if you go back and see the experiments Tom Green was doing, they're very bold, they're very wild and brave. But they're very sharp. And at the time, he was viewed as like the butt of comedy. But over time, I think if you go back and look, it's like, oh, wow, this guy was supremely sharp and had an eye for like a truly artistic aesthetic. If you see his editing and the way the videos look and the way he approached his comedy, because people would get furious at him in those old prank clips. But if you watch them, he's like not like he's like not like truly antagonistic. He's like Canadian and very polite, but there's something that just irked people about him. And I found that really brilliant that he could just ask people, where are you going? And someone would flip out on him. And I just think he had such a unique approach. I think he was really ahead of his time, and he influenced me so much in my work. Getting to meet him was a huge deal for me because I got to pick his
wait. Talk to me about that. How'd you meet Tom Green?
So I actually met him. So I first talked to him when I was running for city council, when I was in LA for the Talk House interview with Tim Heidecker. That was the first time I'd ever met Tim Heidecker. And then the next day I told the documentary production company, they were making the doc. I was like, I want to meet Tom Green somehow. And they were like, oh, we'll do some digging and see what we can find. And I ended up getting a call from Tom Green's manager, who I believe is Rob Schneider's. Well, this was a long time ago. I don't know if this still is manager, but at the time, I believe Tom Green's manager was Rob Schneider's brother. Okay. And I was talking to Rob Schneider's brother, who told me he had run for city council in his 20s. So me and Rob Schneider's brother had a long talk about this. And then eventually he was like, oh, okay, I'll pass your number along to Tom. And then Tom called me and he was like, hey, I'm really far from where you're at in LA, because I was like in Venice. So I might as well have been like in another state or something. So we didn't get to meet in person, but I talked to him a long time on the phone, which started a correspondence with him where me and him would talk on the phone. I eventually got to meet him in person at a stand-up show he did in Texas. We finally got to meet in person. But he's genuinely one of the nicest people I've ever met. He's very humble about his work. I could tell it was making him a little uncomfortable that I was like gushing about his influence and what he's done. But I just felt it was important to let him know, like, Tom, you were so ahead of everybody, and it needs to be said, because I feel like he still hasn't gotten his credit for it. Because I do think Tim and Eric are very influential on internet humor. I think they were insanely influential. But sometimes I feel like Tom Green isn't talked about in the same way as Tim and Eric, when I feel like he absolutely should be talked about in the same way Tim and Eric are, in terms of... Oh, yeah,
you're absolutely right.
In terms of influence on outsider comedy. Because, I mean, people like Eric Andre have said, like, Tom Green was a huge influence, which I can definitely see the parallels between the Eric Andre show and the Tom Green show, with him having, like, the whole late night looking set.
Yeah.
But Tom Green just had such an influence on what I do. And then bring in Harmony Korine, whose aesthetic and the way he approaches making art, almost like a non-artist. I mean, Harmony Korine is like very open with there's that famous quote where the head of the studio that was going to fund Gummo basically said, I'll fund the movie, but you just can't say it's art. And Harmony was like, oh yeah, no, this is not art. Like, this is not art. And this movie is not art. And I really appreciated that, where it's just kind of like, no, like this isn't art. And I feel like Tom Green did the same thing. I don't think he viewed what he did as art, but now we all view Harmony Korine's work as art. Now I view Tom Green's work as art. You know, I just think they have a really unique eye that makes them stand out from everybody. So that's what I try to do in my work.
Yeah. I mean, I think it really shows. And I'm glad you mentioned Eric Andre stuff too, because just the whole Adult Swim aesthetic. And I think the biggest thing too is a lot of those guys, you know, Eric Andre is an incredible musician. I actually think he's a Berkeley jazz guy.
Yeah, stand-up bass.
Yeah, stand-up bass, which is like, I mean, that's heavy hitter stuff.
And Tom Green was a rapper. Like, he had a hit. Like, I can't remember the name of the group he was in, but as a teenager, he was in a rap group in Canada that had a hit. Like, they were a legitimate Beastie Boys style rap group. So it wasn't like a little project.
Oh.
That's what's interesting about Tom is he had a fairly successful career in rap. And then he was also really good at skating. And the only reason he didn't pursue skating is because of an injury. Like, Tom Green can skate. Did I lose you? Oh, I think we lost connection. Yeah, kicked off. I need to see if he gets back on there.
What a way to drop out as you're making the hot take of Tom Green's music career, the unappreciated music career, and my flippin' internet dies. See, man, this is where your multi-dimensional government action involvement could come in and fix local broadband for all.
That's the priority. That's the goal.
Is that like is the government, you know, local democratic representation, is that still a plan or a desire?
Not right now, no. I mean, I always say if people watch the documentary on my city council run, they'll see it kicked my ass. I mean, it's brutal. It is not something you do for fun, which I didn't do it for fun.
Yeah.
It started off as a joke, but then I went into it seriously. And it is very, very, very hard work, uphill battle, and the odds are completely against you. So it's just a complete mess, very soul crushing.
Yeah. Well, glad you kind of made it out on the other side. But I will say I mean, at least for like having people like figure you out, and I think more having people get inspired by what you were doing. I know you had referenced people coming up to you and actually starting to ask you more questions about the logistics of local politics and what that looks like. So, I mean, maybe you're the spark that the town needed.
I hope so. I mean, that's all I can hope, really.
Are you a lifer for Amarillo?
I mean, I don't know if I'll always live in Amarillo, but I will always find Amarillo endlessly intriguing. And I've found a lot of inspiration from Amarillo. So I'm a lifer in that sense. Like, I know a lot of people that leave Amarillo and they're like, I hate that place. It's the worst place on earth. And I've never really been that way. I don't really view Amarillo in that light.
Yeah. I mean, I lived in St. Louis when I was younger and was trying to do music here. It was basically my whole life, and then moved to New York and lived in New York for 16, 17 years and then moved back during COVID. Mm-hmm. And it's weird the appreciation you get for where you're from. Because like I feel like when you're in it, you know, especially I was younger, I was 18 when I left. I hated this place. I hated St. Louis. I was like, there's no good music. There's no good scene. And now it's funny. The first thing I tell people is like, man, St. Louis is great. Like I got Tom York coming in my backyard in a month, and it's going to be, and all of a sudden I'm like preaching on the other side. Like, did you ever really like, were you like ever wrestling with where you were from?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I think the most difficult thing is, even still to this day, people in Amarillo aren't really a fan of my music. It just doesn't register here.
What is the music in Amarillo that people are into? Just like everything else?
Probably, yeah. I mean, in terms of what's in, like, there's not a whole lot of bands or local music here. Mm-hmm. Not much of a music scene, anything like that. And I'm not sure what people are listening to in their daily life. Probably a lot of country and things like that. But it's kind of weird. My music just doesn't have a following in Amarillo. If I go to my Spotify and look at my most like cities I'm most played in out of the 100, I don't even think Amarillo's on there. But, you know, you can see Paris, but not Amarillo, which is kind of ironic.
That's interesting with using something like Spotify to kind of like figure out where you're being listened to. Because I feel like that's a pretty interesting advantage that a lot of musicians probably didn't have back then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you do like your tour routing through that?
Through
just like seeing where you're hot?
Yes and no, but a lot of the times it's like the most like New York, LA, Austin, like those are all up there on my Spotify. So it's just kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. That's easy.
Yeah.
But I'm only just now starting to tour. I've never really done that before. So this is honestly the first time I've ever really done it. So this is figuring it out live, like for the first time.
Oh my God. And you play in like a lot of different tunings too, right?
Yes.
So how many axes you got to bring? 6?
So usually 3, a 6-string acoustic, a 12-string acoustic, and an electric.
Okay.
And usually what I do is I try to make my set list work where it's like the least amount of tunings in between. So if I can like only have to tune 1 or 2 strings in between songs, that's better versus having to retune all 6. I've been having a lot of nightmares recently because I'm going on Tears and opening for Jenny Lewis. And 2 nights in a row, I've had nightmares of being on stage with like bad guitars. I don't know my tunings. I don't have tuning sheets, and people are getting up and walking out. 2 nights in a row I've been having this dream. So it's it messes with me. It's pretty freaky.
Do you keep a dream diary?
No. I don't want to remember this stuff. I want to forget it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I think first off, touring with someone like Jenny Lewis, like you're going to have a good crowd. I think you're going to have people that like, it's not like you're going and you're touring with, I've done shows where we would tour with a band that like no one cared that we were there. Like, I think you're going to have like some nice overlap on that. But have you, doing this kind of tour, with the music that you have, is there a certain set or like performance that you've been working on? Or are you literally just going to go out there, play your songs?
Well, yeah, I have a set. It's mainly like songs from this new record and then songs from the last record I did for Mexican Summer. But it was kind of nice. Like 2 months ago, I went to LA and I opened for this Japanese folk artist, Ichiko Aoba, I think is how you say her name. And it was like a packed show. It was sold out. It was like 1,300 people. And she has the most respectful audience ever. They're just dead quiet, great listeners. Like probably the best audience I've ever played to.
Oh my God.
But I nearly flipped out on stage because I never really played to that large of an audience. And I walked out, I sit in the chair and I look up at 1,300 people and they're just dead silent, just like looking at me. And my hands were super shaky and I started playing, but I just closed my eyes and like hung on for dear life. Made it through the first song, and then the rest of the set was fantastic. But I'm glad I did that show because I'm like, most likely the Ginny Lewis thing is going to be a similar type of zone of packed theater type shows. Yeah. And I don't have a band. It's just kind of me on stage, no singing, instrumental guitar.
Well, I know you're not doing any singing, but you're not going to, there's no one else backing you up or anything?
No, just solo guitar.
Oh,
microphone in front of the sound hole. Like, it's like I struggled with stage fright forever, and I realized like, I'm in the worst music for stage fright.
Yeah, I was going to say, what were you thinking, man?
I don't know. I guess I never thought I would be performing it. And then now that I'm having to perform it, it's quite a challenge, but it's kind of fun. It feels like skydiving. Like every time I do it, it's just like absolutely terrifying, but it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I used to watch, like, I was like way deep in old Jerry Reed videos on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting to see how some of those guys perform because obviously like Jerry Reed wasn't really singing these songs, you know, and even when it's like Chet and Jerry, like they would go out and they would just like play stuff. But half the show was also like a comedy show.
Oh, big time. Yeah. But those guys were like true performers, like absolute performers. It's like the other day I was listening to that live album, Buck Owens at Carnegie Hall. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of weird to me because I'm like, wow, you do not see that style of performing anymore because it's interesting how they have like little bits in between the songs.
Right?
Where, it's just like, it blew me away just the Buck Owens thing where him and the band have like little comedy skits in between. I was like, wow, these guys not only are kicking ass as maybe one of the greatest country bands of all time. And then in between, they're doing like 1950s late night TV stand-up jokes with each other, getting like the hugest laughs out of the audience. And they're really pure comical performers. They're just absolutely incredible.
This doesn't sound that far off from what you can do, though, at least for yourself. I mean, because I feel like, especially because your whole vibe and aesthetic and everything, like, you know, in a good way, like, you look cool. You got like the cool hat. You got the cool glasses. You know, your style's great. You're super talented. So you go out there and play. Like, I don't think if you all of a sudden start referencing like a Far Side comic, people are gonna like start believing.
Well, I make jokes on stage. I mean, I joke, but I definitely like Leo Kottke, who's a very famous solo guitarist. Yep. He's very well known for his onstage banter and stories, and he's very masterful, and he's also like his stories are very funny. Leo Kottke is almost like a lowercase comedian. Like he's not an outright comedian, but like his jokes are very funny, and in a weird way, Leo Kottke has a lot in common with like Norm Macdonald style joke telling. If you hear Leo tell stories, they're very long-winded stories where you're like, where is this going? And then he'll end with a punchline, like he'll tell a long-winded story about meeting Bob Dylan. And then ending with having no recollection of meeting him. Like he just didn't know he had met Bob Dylan. And people will die at these stories. But he delivers them in a way where he almost acts like he's not trying to be funny.
Yeah. There's like a deadpan in there. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Kottke is like, I mean, one of my favorite moments ever on a live record is Leo Kottke has a 1973 live album called My Feet Are Smiling, where he's just shredding through this whole live album. The album opens with him playing this very somber slide piece on the 12 string, and 30 seconds in, he absolutely screws it up. And he stops and goes, well, I blew that, and just goes into the next song, just skips it and just starts ripping the next song. And the audience dies laughing, but it's like, he doesn't try to cover up the fact that he ruined the song. He just says, well, I blew that, and just skips it. It's like, I'm not restarting. Like, I'm just going to go into the next song and just move on. It's such a funny moment, and he's not even trying to be funny.
Yeah, that's like stuff that I want more than ever from concerts and obviously also recordings. I don't know. I feel like maybe it's because so much of music to me feels like sanitized and quantized, right? Right? Like if we're talking Pro Tools here, where there's no humanity in some of the music.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like I like. Do you even loop wheel, bro? Do you know what loop wheel garments are? I actually didn't, honestly. I was just like, oh, it's a flex. It's a special kind of cotton. Yeah, kind of. But the folks at Standard and Strange dropped a ton of knowledge bombs and their own incredible loop wheel tee, made in Japan, of course. But back to loop wheel. It's an antique circular knitting machine that relies on gravity and uses spring bearded needles. Do you get it? Bearded needles? What the heck? Look, all you need to know is it's dope. It's better, and if you want to learn more, visit standardandstrange.com/loopwheel and check out their new loop wheel tees. Trust me, your boy is partial to yellow because, you know, duh, but the tees are fire no matter what color you pick. The fit is spot on, and it's a classic tee that looks like it's from every era ever and fits like a dream. And it's from the folks from Standard and Strange, the shop that helps you own fewer, better things. Run by industry vets who are focused on incredible product from incredible vendors. And look, if that's not your vibe, check out some of their huge offerings of other Japanese denim or boots. But listen, the shirts, fam, the shirts, the loop wheel. So visit standardandstrange.com/loop wheel to learn more. Standard and Strange. Own fewer, better things at standardandstrange.com. Hearing a song from like something like in the 70s or whatever, and you're like, oh, they're not playing on a click, and the beat, the BPM is changed like 5-6 throughout the entire song because they're human.
Yeah, big time. And I've had some musicians tell me I'm hard to play with on recordings because on my music I don't use a click track specifically.
Yeah,
and I like it because the flow of the song, it just has this weird kind of push-pull, like ebb and flow to it. And for a long time, I wasn't using a tuner. I was just tuning by ear. And I
Wait, what?
I was tuning by ear, and my tunings were in tune, but sharp.
Yeah, sure.
Like they were just a hair sharp. And I remember Luke Snyder, the pedal steel player who played on Letting Go, he sent back the track and he was like, yeah, I was having to play in between the lines to like match up with you because you were sharp. And I was like, great. But I mean, I think it gives my album a unique sound. I like the ebb and the flow. And I mean, this is obviously like that famous video where they talked about Jay Dilla's beat making on the MPC, that instead of quantizing the beats, which like snaps them into place, he's doing the natural, like with the buttons hitting the beats. And you're not going to be perfectly in time because that's like human timing, pressing buttons. But the beats aren't quantized, and that's why his beats sound really good, is they have the feel of a live drummer with a natural flow because it's not quantized, which that can make beats sound really stuffy when they're quantized and snapped into place because you always know where the beat's going to land.
Yeah, I mean, that's a dead serious. Like, that's something where, especially now, because like if someone's going to DM me after this, but like I will sit and listen to music now instead of watching movies or something. Like I got a nice DAC. I'll sit and I'll listen to a record start to finish, and hearing the human mistakes and errors and false starts, whether it's old Dylan tapes or, like it makes me feel like more connected to the art. Because we as humans, I'm not trying to get all whatever, like we make mistakes. Like we can't be perfect. We were never made perfect, right? So it's just like hearing the errors, not that like that's what I look for, but just like so much of the other things, it's like it's too perfect. Especially hearing space in a room. Like I was listening to one of your recordings on my nicer headphones, and I'm like, oh, like this wasn't just like one mic on a guitar. Like there's some room energy here, or maybe it just wasn't heavily compressed or what. But I mean, it feels much more intimate.
Yeah, and that's definitely the goal. Is just I kind of want it to feel like you're inside of the guitar.
Yeah,
and you can hear my fingers going against the string, so you hear a little bit of kind of sound.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that's like a touchy thing with some people because I know I used to have comments from people saying, I don't like the string noise. And it's just like, okay, well, I'm not going to change that.
Fuck off.
Like, yeah, it's just
sorry,
like,
that's me saying. Yeah.
It's just like that's how I play. But I mean, I get what you're saying about the human element in music. I mean, it's weird because I was listening back to the Todd Rundgren song "Hello, It's Me," and there's two versions of that song on streaming. There's the one that immediately goes right into the song, and then there's the one on the album where it has these 3 like false starts that you hear Todd talking. He's like 1, 2, and it's like bing, bing, like the organ, and it stops. Like you keep thinking the song's about to start, and he's like 1, 2, ding, ding, stop, and he's like a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then it comes in. And it sounds incredible, and I don't know why the version with the false starts makes it sound so much better than the one that had those removed. And I think it's because it makes you realize how damn good this song sounds. Like, oh shit, these are guys in the room together, all playing at the same time, and there's like room for error. But once they all come in, you're like, this is the best music has ever sounded. Like, this is the pinnacle of what music can sound like when Hello, It's Me all comes in after those false starts. And you realize, oh wow, these guys know what they're doing.
Yeah, like when you're recording your stuff, are you, do you set yourself like a track limit? Are you only using tape, or is it like, because I joke about this and I've said this before. Like for me, some of the best music was like in the 70s ever. Like the best recorded music they had, and I think the limit at that time was like Dark Side of the Moon was made on 16 tracks, right? Yeah. Like that's, we don't need 10,000 tracks for a song or 200 tracks for something like that. And I love, some of the new recordings, and like the new National stuff has got a gajillion tracks on it and it's good, but like the limits I feel like are an interesting way to make art.
Oh yeah, big time. And I mean, in terms of me being in the studio, like the limits I impose on myself is, for one, I don't need more than 16 tracks. Like I don't have a ton of tracks just because the kind of music I make. Mm-hmm. With solo guitar music, it's just kind of, if I'm doing overdubs, it's going to be like some synthesizers, a bass, maybe some field recording. So there's not a whole lot of ingredients going on. The only rules I kind of impose on myself in the studio is most of the time with these good songs, I record the acoustic guitar piece live as a single take.
Oh my God.
I try not to do any comping on them. I think on this new record, which was my most technical record I've ever made, I think there's 2 comps on the whole record. On Letting Go, there was 1.
Wow.
And actually, I don't even think it was a comp on Letting Go. I just removed a part from a song. So it wasn't a comp. On this new record, there's 2. And then when I'm recording, when I'm in the studio in front of the mics, if I have a solo guitar piece I'm going to play, I allow myself only 3 takes. If I can't get it right in 3 takes, I have to quit the song for the day and move on. I can't do more than 3 takes because it will get worse, which is weird because my friend Mason Lindahl, who's an amazing guitar player, I told him that and he was like, really? He's like, I think on some of my songs in my new one, I was doing 97, 98 takes. I was like, really? He was like, yeah, I have to do just a ton of them. That's how they get good. And I was like, I could not imagine doing 97 takes of a solo guitar song. That would kill me.
I was going to say, where did the 3 take limit come from?
It's just if I can't nail it after 3 takes, you're wasting your time. It's going to get worse. Like, just give up. Like, move on to something else. It's just not clicking if you can't like get it after 3 takes. So, and when I did this newest record, I had 7 solo acoustic guitar pieces.
Yeah.
I went in the studio, and on first day we started at 8 in the morning and finished at 6, and I recorded every single solo guitar piece in that first day. And I got the idea because Leo Kottke recorded 6 and 12 string guitar, his 1969 album that's widely considered to be his best work. He claimed he recorded that was done in 4 hours. He said he went to the studio. He's like, they set up the mics. I sat in front of the mics and I played everything I knew. And that was it. And I'm like, that's how you make a guitar record, is just like practice the shit out of the songs, get them really good, sit in front of the mic, and then be able to play them. That's why before I went in the studio, I practiced every day for 4 hours, 3-4 hours every single day. Because I knew once I get in the studio, I have to be playing well or else I'm going to be screwed, because I have to get this record done. And if I'm not able to play, there's no record. Like, there's no one can fill in the blanks on that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, but just for listeners and stuff, like that's the polar opposite mindset of what many musicians have when they go in the studio. Because studio time, one, is cheap. And in most cases, you can just do stuff at home. I mean, and so it was only earlier eras of recording where you didn't go unless you were perfect. But that's super interesting that like that's your, because I mean, just so many people, you know, they're more focused on go to the studio because you can sit there all day and you can cook, versus you're like, you're locked before you're entering the door.
Yeah, because my biggest thing is I'm an easily distracted person, so I have to be hyper focused to get something done. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually not a big fan of like crazy studio experimentation, because I feel like I can get really lost in the, let's add a mellotron to this. Well, let's run a phaser through the mellotron. Let's try to make up the mellotron. Like, I'm like, dear God, like we could get like lost for hours in this one overdub. It's just like, I really, really have to maintain focus when I'm making a record, so I can ensure it gets done. Just because the way I work, I'm just like all over the place, really distracted. So I really have to, if I'm zoned in, I have to stay zoned in. And if someone starts getting off track with like an overdub, I'm like, no, we can't do that. Like, we can't do that right now. Like I'm going to lose the momentum if we do that. So luckily, that's why I tracked all acoustic guitar parts first day, so it allowed us to have room to do overdubs without me freaking out about getting stuff done. Because if I would have done track by track, recording the acoustic guitar, then adding overdubs to that track, it probably would have taken me 1 week per song.
Oh man!
If we would have done it that way, and that just was not possible. So I tracked the whole album one day in terms of the core compositions. And I told the producer Treyer, I jokingly said, the way we're going to make this album is we're making 2 different records. The first record we have to make is a 100% solo guitar record. That's the first record. Then the second record is the solo acoustic guitar record with the overdubs. So we had to make 2 records to make one good record. And that's the template. If you can make the first 100% solo guitar record and it could stand on its own as a perfect solo guitar record, then you're great. Then do the overdubs, you know? So that was my ideas. We make 2 records to make 1 record.
Where did that idea come from?
Well, like I said, back to the Leo Cocky thing. That's how we made 6 and 12 string guitar. And that's a great record. But I didn't want to release a 100% solo acoustic guitar record like Leo Cocky's. I did want to have ambience and synthesizer and bass to fill it out. But if you can make the album first like the Leo Cocky record, like treat it like this is what's going to be released. If this had to be released, would you be okay with it? That's the foundation I want to build on, is like, if I wasn't allowed to do overdubs, would I put my name on it? And the answer was yes. I felt confident in those solo guitar recordings that I would have released those completely dry acoustic guitar if I had to, but that wasn't the record I was trying to make. But that's the thing. If you view it from the perspective of making 2 different records, you will make a really good record, you know? But it's like the idea of like Nick Drake's Pink Moon, you know, that's almost the same idea of like, if Nick Drake wanted to, the Pink Moon could have been a full-blown orchestral record. If he wanted to, he could have started with Pink Moon the way it was and then gone on a full orchestral. Luckily, he didn't, because it wouldn't have worked for that album. And it's perfect the way it is. You know, compared to his previous records that do have strings and John Cale producing and all of those things. Yeah. But I think that's a fun way to make records, is like, if you can make a really good stripped down record first, then add on to it. You know, it doesn't always work. I mean, Bruce Springsteen said with Nebraska, he tried to do the demos, then do it with the E Street Band. And he was like, this isn't working. So sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you need to stick with the first version, but that's why it's good. It's almost album insurance, because if you make the first version, that's the minimalist version, and it sounds good, and then you move on to the second version and it doesn't click, cool, you have an album, you know, all ready to go. But you can't move backwards. It's a lot harder to do the extravagant orchestral album first and then work your way back to minimalism. It's a lot harder to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, this is making me thinking of like Beatles stuff, where you know, like how they would demo and then George Martin coming in and just being like, let's get nuts in here.
For sure. And I mean, I feel like that speaks to like a Rick Rubin, who is the king of people having like really extravagant things, and then he comes in and like so Rick Rubin might be like one of the few people who can like go from extravagant to stripped down. He's like the only one who's like really good at reducing maximalist to minimalist. And I mean, I always found his work on Kanye West Yeezus really interesting, because he stripped that down 2 weeks before it was released. and made a true minimalist, maximalist masterpiece. So I find that method of producing a record really interesting, but I don't recommend doing it because that seems kind of iffy to start off maximalist and then have someone strip it down for you.
I do want to talk about the vibe, the clothes here. So you've really like nailed this this like 70s suit with like the hats and stuff. Where did this come from?
Well, I don't know. I started experimenting with like kind of fashion related stuff when I was doing those goofy photos. I would put together, like, me and my wife would take these photos where it's like the idea was trying to come up with like stuff that looks high fashion but dumb as hell is like the idea. It needs to look fashionable but also really stupid. So we were experimenting with a lot of stuff like that, finding thrift store clothes, borrowing clothes from like theaters my wife was working at, and just assembling these really stupid outfits. And then it got to the point where like I started trolling fashion brands because like I made fake posts claiming I was working with Gucci. Then I made a fake post claiming Gucci was suing me for copyright infringement. Yeah. And then that's what's weird is from those fake posts, Gucci reached out to me and I ended up
I was going to say you walked the runway for Gucci.
Yeah, by joking that they were suing me. You know, so that worked out really weird. You know, definitely was not something I expected to happen.
With the suits, like, do you like ever get stuff made for you, or is it literally? I mean, because I guess you're probably a pretty good off the rack fit.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all stuff I find at thrift stores and things like that. But it's like I'm a smaller person, so it's like definitely some suits, like a tan Western suit I have is like a 70s women's suit. It's very small because like most like men's stuff is just absolutely huge on me. But then again, I've worn like men's XXL jackets where I've put a curtain rod in the shoulders type of thing, almost like the Carol Burnett like curtain bit with the curtain rod on the shoulders, but I put it like in the jacket to have these super wide shoulders, so it looks like Talking Head style, David Byrne style kind of thing. But it's just like weird experimenting. I'm just like constantly experimenting with goofy stuff. I have no history in fashion. I don't know really anything about fashion at all. I just
welcome to the show. No one does. I mean, that's you just have the opinion, and therefore you know.
Yeah, I just pretend like I know what I'm doing, and then have fun with it. So, like anything I do, it's just constant experimentation and trying things that I have no experience in and just seeing what happens.
Does it ever mess with you now that like I feel like more and more people across the U.S. are really trying to jock the whole I'm going to wear cowboy boots now and I'm going to wear flared jeans and I've been wearing Wranglers and Western shirts and like does that ever mess with you or how do you feel about that?
No, I really can't gatekeep cowboy Western stuff. And the reason why is I'm from Amarillo, Texas, born and raised here. I've only lived in Texas. But to give you an example of why I can't gatekeep that stuff is one time I was wearing a King Ropes hat, which is a rope brand, lasso brand. Mm-hmm. And I was wearing an Amarillo and this old cowboy guy walks up to me and was like, "Are you a team roper?" Like calling me out for wearing it like I wasn't legit. And the funny thing is like, it's weird, this old guy, it was almost identical to how skaters call people out for wearing Thrasher. I was like, wow, like these old cowboys are like skaters. Like they're like rep checking you and your gear. Like, do you actually do that? So obviously I can't really call people out for wearing cowboy hats because if I don't wear cowboy hats out in Amarillo because I would look like a poser. Like I can't wear a cowboy hat here. Like I don't wear cowboy hats out anywhere, but I especially would not wear one in Amarillo. So I'm not going to call people out because like I'm not authentic here wearing a cowboy hat. So it's like I can't gatekeep people on that when I'm not even authentic.
Well, the funny thing is, though, I think externally, you are the representation for a lot of young people of like the guy who is running his hometown and embodying the culture of his hometown and selling, communicating and displaying that culture for everyone else. I mean,
yeah, I play on it. I mean, I definitely play on cowboy Western culture, but warp it through comedy. But it's like, there's country dudes like Coulter Wall, which that guy's Canadian, but so like he works on a ranch. He's an actual cowboy. Yeah. So it's like if I were to meet Coulter Wall and be wearing a cowboy hat, I'd feel like the biggest tool in the world if I met him. It was like, howdy. And this guy just glares at me like, oh, okay. So it's like, I'm definitely not authentic in that way. I'm not Western. I'm not cowboy. But I am from Texas. I mean, I love I like a lot of the imagery from Texas, but I always have to be vocal and acknowledge that's just like, do whatever you want. I'm not authentic. And technically speaking, very few people are actually authentic. You know, it's just like you know,
Yeah.
we can't be cowboys. You know, there's no way. It's just not possible.
Yeah. I feel like a bunch of people started watching Yellowstone and all of a sudden like it's boots and hats and they're all in it. Like even people in my neighborhood, and I live in an area I'm in St. Louis, Missouri now, and you have people here who are commuting to the big city. Like I was talking to this guy at a coffee shop and he's like, oh yeah, I'm from Hannibal in Missouri. And he's like, you know, I was really looking for a change of scenery and I wanted to move to like, you know, the city. And I was like, oh, and in my head, I'm like, oh, New York. I was like, so how long did you live in New York? And he's like, no, St. Louis. This is the city for me. And I'm like, oh shit. And he's like, yeah, like I live, you know, grew up on a farm, lived on a ranch. And I'm always like interested by like, you know, the people that are wearing this stuff for utilitarian reasons. And then you have all the fashion people now where it's like people want nudie suits and cowboy boots and
well, that's the only thing I'll say. People should not wear nudie suits. We need to end it. Like end nudie suits. Like don't do that. Like that's the worst. Like when I see people wearing nudie suits, that's just a no-go.
Wait, and why?
Because I mean, it's just like you're like that's the one thing that I feel like needs to be gate kept. Like, I think it's funny because there's that Andy Samberg movie, Palm Springs.
Yeah.
And movie. I love in that movie, which it's like a bunch of hipster people at a wedding in Palm Springs. And there's a guy wearing a nudie suit who like, he's the only guy that has Coke on him. And I love that they wrote that that's the guy who does Coke is the guy in the nudie suit. And I'm like, that's the people who wear nudie suits. It's just like, if you wear a nudie suit, you are a nerd. Like you are an absolute nerd. And I feel like if somebody wears a nudie suit, bully them. Like could you imagine if someone walked out with a nudie suit and people were just pointing at them, just laughing? Like what is that? Like, what are you doing? You know, that's the one thing I'll say. Unless it's like something really funny, you will never see me in a nudie suit. I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh,
I'm being a hater about this, like an absolute hater. But that is kind of a pet peeve of like nudie suits. That kind of sketches me out.
I mean, strong opinions. There you go. That's what gives fashion sense. With, you know, as we were talking, a lot of the stuff you've been referencing are all around like the 70s. What's like the daily media diet, or like what were the stuff that you've been listening to or watching while you're making this record?
So in terms of like what I listen to while making a record, what I listen to before making a record is usually kind of weird because I mean, when I did Letting Go, I was very honest that like most of what I was listening to was rap like Earl Sweatshirt. It wasn't really stuff
great rap.
Yeah, it wasn't really stuff like what I'm making. I just trying to like listen to stuff that inspires me artistically outside of what I do. And I mean, I'm not like a huge TV watcher, but I mean, like recently, something I've been watching a ton is I've been watching Little House on the Prairie again. No, it's a weird show. People need to go back and watch that show because there's some shows like The Waltons that are corny. Like I don't tell people go watch The Waltons for the 70s because that show's very earnest and sappy and corny. Little House on the Prairie is earnest, sappy, and corny, but it's also unhinged. Like nothing about that show makes sense. Like that is a show where I think the writer's room was filled with people doing cocaine, where they're laughing to each other like, what if this episode the mom gets cut by a rusty nail while the kids are on a church retreat and she starts hallucinating? And that's an episode. That's a real episode in the show. Then there's another episode where it's just like, what if someone in a clown mask comes into town and starts raping people and no one figures out what the rapist clown was?
Wait,
that's an episode. That's
oh
an episode
God.
where there's a rapist clown. And it's like, why is this in Little House on the Prairie? There's an episode where the kid Albert gets addicted to morphine and becomes a junkie. And it's like a depressing episode. It's not lighthearted. It is soul-crushingly grim. And you're like, okay, the last episode was about y'all going on a picnic and having to win a tug-of-war match. And then the next episode, Albert's on morphine and is going through withdrawals.
Wow.
You can't, like, there's nothing like that. So I watch a lot of Little House on the Prairie because it is very, very, very strange. I just wish the Moody Blues would have soundtracked Little House on the Prairie. That would have made the best show ever made. Easily.
Oh my God, I fucking love the Moody Blues.
Could you imagine Little House on the Prairie with Mellotrons?
And DX7s and
but
stuff.
There are some Moog style synths that pop up on Little House on the Prairie in the score. there is some weird synthesizer stuff that pops up from time to time, which is cool.
Man. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I feel like I got to revisit Little House on the Prairie. Where
should.
are you watching this on? What is it on?
It is on the streaming service Peacock that has all of the seasons.
Oh,
I'm borrowing the login from somebody. I don't even pay for that stuff.
I love that. That's like the new thing that everyone will say. Like if you're watching a streaming network that might be like a little mainstream, people are like, well, I don't even have the login.
It's not mine.
So. It's like, not mine.
It's like
don't judge.
I'm holding it for a friend kind of deal when you're gatekeeping on streaming. But yeah, go watch Little House on the Prairie. I recommend everyone go watch it. It is highly entertaining, very strange. And I think a lot of people will realize it's an enjoyable show. I think it needs to be considered outsider media.
Wow, that's a hell of a take.
Yeah, you can watch it next to like Mary Hartman. You can watch it in the same way.
I did also. I used to love Dr. Quinn. That was. I mean, this is when I was like much younger, but because we didn't have cable. We had the library, which is where you could go and check out stuff. And funny enough, most of the things that you could check out at our local library was like Faulty Towers and a lot of this like British stuff, or even like Monty Python, which I think was really interesting. They would let a 8-year-old kid check out Life of Brian, which if anyone's seen it, it's probably not something you'd want an 8-year-old to watch. Yeah. But I remember like, you could just go and do that. And like the programming for kids was just like, I don't know, whatever stuff that wasn't on the air anymore. But yeah, there's lots of good stuff in there.
I grew up homeschooled and my dad was a preacher. Never like didn't do public school at all. And also it was a similar thing of like no cable TV. Just the library and a lot of stuff like the Waltons and Little House on the Prairie. And the library was like a huge resource for me. Because like you said, I remember being like 12 and renting a documentary on like Dogtown Z Boys, like the skating documentary. And it had like nudity in it and like very foul language and drug use. And I was like 12 kind of looking over my shoulder like, does anyone know I'm watching this? I think people just think the library just only has good pleasant, nice content. It's like, no, they had some pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I'd see. Okay, I knew you were a preacher's kid. I was like, I'm getting the same vibe that this guy's got because you got the references, but all your things are still wholesome. And I think that is one of the most incredible things about all this stuff is like, it's not like just being weird. I mean, there's deep love and affinity for your roots and your connections. And I don't know. I feel like that's a very common thing with PKs.
Yeah.
Are you religious?
Yeah.
Nice. How's that working out?
How's that working out for you? It's good. I'm miserable, so it's working out good. I'm kidding. No, it's like I was raised Christian. My dad was a preacher. And not going to lie, I had some very, very weird years where I was very frustrated by that whole thing. I didn't like being homeschooled. It was, I don't know. And my dad was a preacher at a truck stop too, like at a chapel at a truck stop. And the chapel was an 18-wheeler trailer that had been converted into a chapel with like laminated floors and a podium. So we're not talking normal preacher's kid. This isn't like typical. So I was around truckers and drug addicts and schizophrenics and weird people like that. So I saw a lot of strange stuff.
Wow. Yeah. My dad was, because a lot of people, it's like, oh, your dad was a preacher. People like, oh, are you, very anti-church or whatever it is, like assuming that there was, and in a weird way, like my parents did not impose or force any form of religion on me. And I remember calling my dad when I was in New York and telling him that I was going to be a Buddhist. And he was like, cool, dude.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wait, like, is that going to bother you? And he's like, no. He's like, you just need to find some sort of faith or something to cling to. Like he would always talk about that. He's like, you need to, he's like, whether it's music or he's like, you need a community. He's like, I don't care if you're into Jesus or into Buddha or into whatever. He's
L.
like,
Ron Hubbard.
Or L. Ron.
Whatever.
Funny enough, I imagine that was probably one of the ones he might have had an issue with. But like, he was just like, you just need to have some sort of like faith in something or some sort of connection, because otherwise you're going to be wandering around not knowing who you are, and you're going to try to make an identity of garbage.
Interesting.
And I was like, well, joke's on you. I'm already halfway there. Yeah.
I'm already wearing nudie suits.
Yeah, I was like, Dad, look, I'm wearing nudies.
Dude, my religion is nudie suits and cocaine. That sounds like a t-shirt you would see on Instagram, like one of those actual shirts on a spam account. Gosh, oh, that's brutal.
That's amazing. So did you get into, music stuff through that? Like, I mean, because I will go back now and listen to like some old gospel music, but also like 80s Christian music sometimes. And being like, sometimes there's some really good stuff in here, whether it's like Petra or some like Bizarro stuff. I don't know.
I didn't really listen to Christian music a lot. Like my introduction to music was not through Christian music. And I say luckily because, to be frank, most white Christian music is awful. I mean,
I wholeheartedly agree.
White Christian music is really bad. I mean, you can go back and listen to like black religious music from the 20s, 30s, 40s. And obviously it's better than any music ever made. I mean, you don't have to be a Christian to realize like how insanely good that kind of music is. But I ended up getting into music because when I was like 10, 11, my mom was playing stuff in the car like Santana, like 60s, 70s Santana. And that's what made me want to play guitar was because of Santana. And then I got into Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, all of that stuff when you're 10, 11, 12. And then from there, it just slowly started warping. It just got weirder and weirder and weirder. Because I mean, it's like, I could probably say it now, like in a really fast way. The way the pipeline works is you start with Santana, then you go to Eric Clapton, then you go to Stevie Ray Vaughan, and then you find Pink Floyd, and then from Pink Floyd you find Tangerine Dream, then you find King Crimson, then you find Throbbing Gristle, and then you find Stockhausen, then you find Can. Like that's the pipeline of step by step of like you start with Santana and then you get to Stockhausen. Like but Zappa has to be in there. I mean, I left him out because that's actually really important because it probably needs to be like Santana, Clapton, and then you find Zappa, and then from there all bets are off, and then it gets really crazy. But prog rock is actually before Zappa.
Is Beefheart in there?
Yeah, that's later down the timeline. But prog rock for me is when everything got weird. Like the two bands that changed everything were Genesis and then Ry Cooder. Those were the two people that just made things change where I wasn't really into like blues guitar anymore because Ry Cooder played with the slide. So I started playing with the slide. And then when I was 14, I got a Genesis it was Nursery Crime, one of their prog CDs. And then that's how I really started getting into weird music because I started really following that path of, well, if you go to Genesis to Van der Graaf Generator, and then you keep going and keep going and keep going, you end up on Henry Cow and like really, really weird, like prog starts disintegrating, and then you're on This Heat. Because This Heat's an interesting band because Charles Hayward is legitimately one of the few people that has a connection between the prog world and the post-punk world. Because Charles Hayward played drums in bands like Gong. Like, he played in Gong.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Shit. Yeah, like he played during the Gong jazz fusion years. Uh-huh. He played in a band called Quiet Sun that I think had one of the members of Roxy Music. That's a straight up prog band. Like Charles Hayward started out in straight up prog. So when you hear the first This Heat album, it opens with Horizontal Hold, which sounds like thrash metal. It's so gnarly. And then it cuts to this like weird Frank Zappa Mothers of Invention sounding thing. And then you remember, Charles Hayward started off relatively proggy and then got played in Crass. Like Charles Hayward filled in Crass, which is crazy. Like Charles Hayward played in prog bands Crass and then did This Heat, which is unreal.
So where are you listening to some of this music? If someone else wants to listen to this, a lot of these things that you mentioned are not on like streaming services.
So the way I found stuff is luckily I was like at the very end of the blog era when I was in high school. So I was going to the library renting weird CDs like Miles Davis at the Fillmore East. That was the kind of CDs I was renting. But then I finally was allowed on the internet at 15 years old. I found a website called Mutant Sounds Blogspot. That was a very unhinged blog that it was like, today the album is this Nurse with Wound List album of like two guys banging 2x4s together and screaming. Like that was the zone. And I got really into that. I was really into the deep, craziest, weirdest stuff. But I remember finding bands like Perubu and like really weird post-punky type bands. And then John Fahey came in and Stockhausen. And I was like really into like Fred Frith and making noise with the guitar. So blogs, YouTube.
There's a lot of good stuff on YouTube. Music-wise.
I was like really deep into that kind of stuff, and I was just obsessed with bands like Faust. Like that stuff just melted, like truly, like Faust still to this day. I listen back to Faust. I'm like, wow, it's still that weird. Like, it's not like I got older and was like, oh, I thought Dark Side of the Moon was so gnarly when I was 14. But like with Faust, you go back and listen to Faust and you're like, holy shit, this is gnarly music. Like, this is unhinged, crazy music. And I'm so glad I found it when I did, because it, like, I would not be the kind of person I am now if it wasn't for those kind of records. But there's just certain records in my mind that stick out to me, like Pere Ubu's Dub Housing. I remember finding that album the week I found the Miles Davis at the Fillmore East. Mm-hmm. And I, for some reason, Dub Housing by Pere Ubu and that Miles Davis live record, I linked together because I was listening to them at the same time. And they were both so heavy. I was like, this is the heaviest music ever made. And still is just, wow. This is just absolutely unhinged, crazy music.
I feel like you got to do some sort of like music appreciation course, because a lot of the stuff you mentioned, first off, is like a murderer's row of some of the greatest underappreciated, if you know musicians ever, outside of people like Miles Davis. You know, because a lot of people were like their awareness of like Frank Zappa is just that there was a kid named Moon Unit, right? But like not actually understanding some of the music and like recording and songwriting. I don't know, boundary pushing. I stumbled to find the right words to actually describe how evolutionary a lot of this stuff was.
For real. Yeah. I mean, like the Mothers of Invention were only in it for the money album. Yep. And this is another hot take, but Zappa started sucking when he started playing with other technically competent musicians. I think the Mothers of Invention worked because you almost got the vibe that some of these guys were absolute idiots. Like, he was working with dudes who were almost seemed like total like very drugged out, tripped out freaks. And I think that worked really well for Zappa, because hot take, Zappa after like 1970 starts to just turn into trash. Like bad prog, bad jazz fusion. I don't want to hear a xylophone. I don't want to hear like, it turns really bad. Where if you hear We're Only In It For The Money, it has these like Stockhausen-esque tape loop pieces where voices are coming in and out. It's truly schizophrenic music. And it's truly still to this day, if you listen to We're Only In It For The Money, groundbreaking. It's one of the best things you will ever hear in your life, music-wise. No one will make a better album than that. No one in the past 20 years has made a better album than We're Only In It For The Money. Show me one person that has. There's not.
Oh, man.
There's not a better album than that. No one's done anything like that. No one's been that innovative in music in the past 20 years like We're Only In It For The Money.
So I was going to say, like, we're going to start to wrap in a minute. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, like, what are the 3 albums that you would recommend to everyone listen to? And it sounds like We're Only In It For The Money is up there.
I mean, if I had to choose 3 right now off the top of my head, We're Only In It For The Money, Mothers of Invention, Astro Weeks, Van Morrison, Yellow Princess, John Fahey. Those are the 3.
Man, first off, it's funny that I want to intentionally leave this in. Amar's my editor. Like, when I usually ask people this question, sometimes it takes 10 minutes because they're like, well, and so my editor will clean up the amount of time it takes, someone to figure this out. And I want to say the fact that you were like, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, and I have to say my answers will probably change 15 minutes from now. There's probably 15 groups of 3 I could have picked. But I am fully comfortable choosing those 3 as I'm cool with that being the primer to me, the everything. Like, I'm content with saying those 3 records and leaving it at
that. So all of this being said, when does the prog rock album come out for you? Because it's interesting that like your knowledge of this is so vast, it's so incredible. You know all your shit, but the music that you make, which is beautiful, is the most stripped down, bare bones. I don't know. Do you have any intention to do any sort of like heavy, crazy prog stuff?
I would love to. One day I want to make a Mike Oldfield style album, because Mike Oldfield's Oma Dawn was like really big for me back then. And that has like so many overdubs. And the funny story on that album is he literally had to restart the entire album because he put so many overdubs on the tape. It just fell apart and destroyed the record. And he had to remake it because he put so many overdubs on that record. But I want to make a Mike Oldfield style, like Tubular Bells, Oma Dawn, prog rock epic one day. I would love to. That's the goal. That is the end goal.
Okay. Damn. Well, I feel like that's a good place to wrap.
Yeah.
Hayden, thank you so much for doing this. I congrats on the album.
Thank you.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes and everything for everyone else. But like, this was a ton of fun.
Oh yeah.
But it was great to meet you. Take
Yeah,
care.
great to meet you. Yeah, thank you so much. This was a blast.
Thanks, man. Okay, folks, that's it. Special thanks to Hayden Pedigo. His album, The Happiest Times I Ever Ignored, is streaming everywhere. Go buy his LP off of Bandcamp. See him on tour with Jenny Lewis this summer. You've been listening to Blammo. Our music is by Breakmaster Cylinder. We're edited by Amar Lal, and we're produced by Blammo Media. If you want to dig deeper, you can join us on Patreon, where we have exclusive episodes, shows, and our amazing, incredible Slack community. All right, folks, have a great week.